Great. Good. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We already have about 18, 20 people with us. I'm sure more will be joining. But my name is George Strand. I'm just here at the Department of Language and Linguistics at the University of Essex, hosting our departmental seminars and webinars. We're excited to be able to host Carmen Herrero from the Manchester Metropolitan University for a talk today on the role of media in language teaching. For those of you, many of you are probably aware that every year my colleagues here at the University of Essex organize a conference on language teaching each year, and this was done online in July. A lot of talk about media. Carmen was hoping to be able to participate in that conference, but wasn't able to. So this is a great opportunity for us to still get to hear about her research and insights. So Carmen, thank you for making the time to finally get to come and share this with us. And we're looking forward to your presentation, what you'll be sharing. But then we'll have at the end of the presentation of about 30 or 40 minutes, we'll have another 10 or 15 minutes for questions and discussion. So everyone who's participating can do that either by writing questions in the Q&A that I'll share with Carmen or by asking to be unmuted, and then I can allow you to ask your own question. So Carmen, thank you for sharing. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to share and also to learn with all of you. So I've been working in the area of the use of screen media and film in language teaching for more than 2 decades. So I think I love films. I love anything related to learning through audiovisual. So what I'm planning to do today is to explain a little bit about the background, where I'm coming from, and the things we have been doing, to tell you a little bit more about possibilities of using a screen media in language teaching and some kind of theoretical background and models that we have been implementing and experimenting with, and a couple of case studies, and then some findings and implications and future work that I'm planning now. So to go back there on the back, because I love to do workshops more than talking like this, but this is an opportunity for all of you to share and to reflect in how you have been using screen media, films, TV series, YouTube in your classroom. What do you think it worked well? Maybe an opportunity in Padlet to see what other colleagues have been doing. What do you think are the main challenges when you are using a screen media? Maybe an example of a student activity or project that involves using a screen media. Do you think that using a screen media have an impact on the development of the intercultural awareness or student engagement or language skills? So maybe that's, you don't have to do it. Obviously, the Padlet will be open, and maybe we can have a look later on at the end of the session to see what you have been sharing with all of us. So a little bit about the context, I think is so clear that visual culture is all around us. When I was starting on this area, it was more difficult to find, films in Spanish or Latin American films or TV series. But nowadays, really, visual culture is part of our daily life, as mentioned there. But what I found over the years that there was a kind of this digital dissonance because on the one hand, we have the class where we were using mainly kind of tests. And on the other hand, what we have is the students using social media and interactive with many screens. So how do we bring together the two areas? So in 2010, with the support of Roots into Languages, we created the Film in Language Teaching Association. We created as an online community of practice. And although it's based in Manchester, we invited colleagues, educators, researchers, teachers from primary, secondary to higher education from around the world. We currently have 5,600 members from 100 countries. Is free membership, and we offer resources. As you will see in a minute, we have over 100 study guides that we have been creating and sharing and improving over the years. So if you look at historically the study guides have been changing as we were changing with the learning we were doing as well. And we wanted to bring it as a multilingual community of practice. So as you will see there are different groups. Anybody can create a group if there is one that is not there and you think, oh, I need to do something about this specific area. So we have obviously French, German, Spanish, Italian. Colleagues join to one or multiple groups if they want, and then they also have free access to the study guides area where we share the resources as well as events. Like, for example, on the 11th of November, we have a webinar by one of my PhD students on the use of Instagram for language teaching. We also encourage colleagues to share any, events or resources that are that they have, because a community of practice is about learning from each other. So was the kind of practice, but we also realized that we needed the research side. So in 2013, we launched the group Field Languages and Media in Education with the same principle. We have a small group at Manchester Met, but the idea was to bring together researchers, PhD students from around the world, working in different areas, from pedagogy in film and media to the tools and teaching practice to, for example, audiovisual translation and so on. The group now is part of the Popular Screen Culture Network here at Manchester Met, and we're still doing like the webinars I mentioned before, a collaboration between film and flame. So over the years, we have been launching and creating some events, like, for example, the conference that took place here at Manchester Met. It was a really exciting moment to see that people were working in this kind of interdisciplinary area around the world. And our first publication, as you can see there, is in 2019. And it followed with other projects and then other publications that came along, and you will be seeing around. What is interesting here is to bring practices from practitioners and researchers from across the world, not only researchers. We also wanted to bring excellent practices that we were seeing in different places. So a little bit about the theoretical frameworks to understand. First, I've been talking about the Film in Language Teaching Association. So we use film in a kind of very wider approach. So anything that it tells the story through moving image. So nowadays, when I ask my students, do you watch films? They may say no, but I mean, I know they are constantly watching moving images in different platforms. So for us, film is a very, as I say, very wide term to include everything from small to bigger to TV series and so on. So when we think about the intersection of screen media, language teaching and learning, when we do workshops with teachers over the years, we realized there were different ways of using screen media. We have some colleagues that they use screen media. This may be, as I say, maybe a little clip from YouTube to the trailer from a film and so on. They don't consider the aesthetic value. They don't need to consider any knowledge of media skills, but they just use it because it's useful maybe for a language or poem or vocabulary and so on. On the other hand, we have some colleagues like myself that they were teaching maybe culture units, and they were using films or documentaries maybe to discuss about those areas. And sometimes they just use screen media as a background information for content that they are discussing in the class. But we thought this was kind of limited. We needed sometimes to bring all these elements all together, like kind of blending and seeing how we can get the most of screen media. And I thought it was very important to understand why we are so attracted to screen media, to films, because really I think it's a wonderful tool, as we say here, as we can see here, for training empathy and mind reading. I mean, when we are teaching languages, we always say we are helping students to develop their intercultural awareness and skills. But I mean, films, they also do that in a way. And I think the other part is the way we are learning through bringing emotions, which sometimes this affective dimension of the film, and this is from the neuroscience in films, is something that we don't realize, but is affecting us, in all of us. Sometimes there are all these elements that we don't think about it, but they are affecting. Let's think about, for example, music and the combination of the sound and the images. So with all this, we thought about which theoretical frameworks and pedagogical models were more useful for us. So on the one hand, we have the importance of the pedagogy of the gaze. As we are saying, visual culture is around us, but sometimes we don't value the importance of analyzing those visual tests. I thought it was very important to consider participatory pedagogy, and now more and more we are seeing about the importance of bringing and co-creation with the students. We also, as I mentioned before, consider the importance of affect and emotional education through films. When we're talking about media, we're talking about a participatory culture. So here is the learning that young people do, and us, we do as well, when we are learning in different spaces, and that's connected learning. And of course, multimodal learning, this is from Cres. The multimodality is an area that has been taking place because of all the technological changes that are happening. The way we are learning now is more than using books or written tests. We are now using more multimodal tests. So films, as we see here, are ideal examples of multimodal tests for multimodal learning. So the approach that we were implementing, it was bringing together the field analysis for the visual elements and developing of the critical skills of learners and the multimodal analysis, so combining the two of them. And there you have a few examples of another publications that came through the connections and the network of the Flame Research Group. So when it comes to the curriculum models and pedagogical practice, we wanted to establish a kind of way of choosing the best screen media tests. So sometimes we consider the pedagogical value that we have, and I'm going to do a little kind of brackets here. You can see here on the right of the screen, we also do activities with secondary schools. These are examples with a cinema that we have here in Manchester. It used to be called Corner House, then Home now, and it's a cinema where regularly they host events for language students, Spanish, French, Arabic, and I think this year as well, German. So imagine a big cinema, over 250 students from different schools. They will come and they will be watching a film, and we created resources to do some activities before and after the screening of the film. So we wanted to integrate in a more active way, in a more student-centered way, the use of these films. We wanted to bring different active learning strategies like project-based learning, the co-creation by students, and in all of them, embedding analysis In some cases, we also have done some activities with audiovisual translation. So when it comes to the critical analysis, for example, and I'm talking now to the secondary language teaching, we can see here how for the essay that they have to write, and they use things like Pan's Labyrinth or Volver by Almodóvar, they need to respond to a question and demonstrate the critical analysis in Spanish of that film. So we run a series of workshops here at Manchester Met, where 3 hours workshop in Spanish, where they will be using this kind of multimodal skill analysis to critically analyze and develop their skills. And the other area that it was important is obviously the aesthetic dimension. We want to use films that have an added value, not only because they are useful, but because they are fantastic and amazing films that make us feel something there. So, as I was trying to explain, this is a summary of over the years. So it's not just like something that happened from one to another. So we started to develop embedding visual analysis in the activities that we were doing. And then we went also to combine the multimodal analysis. And finally, we realized that we needed another approach to make sure that the students develop the critical thinking skills that they needed to be able to work in a collaborative way across different media and platforms. So that's when we moved to the final part, which is the transmedia literacy. So this is not something just that happened new. One of the areas of studies that we were considering, it was the multimodal studies, but also, as you can see here, this is part of the new literacies. So basically, we need to understand that as learners, they need to develop other types of literacies, the ability, as I said, to work with different tests, not only the written test, but also visual and sound and image. But what I was very interested in is in the second part, where it said new literacies are also made of what we might call different ethos stuff. For example, they are often more participatory, more collaborative, and more distributed. They are less author-centric than conventional literacies. So we were trying to see how we can bring that into the use of screen media in language teaching. So for that one, we use other kind of authors. One of them is Jenkins, and I will come back to that one later on. Scolari, who is a scholar who's working in Catalonia. We are going to talk a little bit about the transmedia learning framework in 2024 and also transmedia in education. Robert Pratton was one of the guest speakers in the conference we have here in 2019, talking about transmedia in language education. And the key point there, it was about designing learning environments around student lifestyles. So Harry Jenkins has written several books about the way we are living in a converged culture. So something that starts maybe as a novel, it can be developed later on in a series of films. And think about Harry Potter, for example, then it can be a play. Then the fans can decide that they like a small character in the novel and they develop their own their own stories and narrative and they share it and so on. So this is converged culture. But he also studied with a group of colleagues there. This is a report that is available online. And I think it was, for me, it was a really important point to rethink about what we were having to deal with the new type of student, is the way that students are learning outside the educational spaces. And those skills that they develop, we can use it in our own formal teaching or formal learning spaces. So you have a few there, but I'm just going to focus in a couple of them. One of them is the idea of collective intelligence. So we don't know everything. The principle of collective intelligence is also embedding in the communities of practice. Is the idea that we collaborate and with the skills that each of us have is creating a bigger way of learning. And then the other area I wanted to focus, it was in transmedia navigation. So if we think about transmedia and education, as I say, Robert Pratten talks about transmedia in a different way. Let's think the example I was giving to you before about Harry Potter. So Harry Potter first started as a novel, and then secondary, they started to think about, okay, a film adaptation and then a play. What he's saying is to be truly a transmedia experience, instead of just being a kind of transfer from one to another, it needs to be more complementary. So the fans, they get something extra that is not, for example, in the novel. So now we have examples of transmedia tests that they start already thinking from a kind of complementary way. So a good example of this one will be a series, a Spanish series called La Peste. This one, they have created from the very beginning a whole of series of experiences. So those fans from the series, they can go and online watch the map of the Peste. They can go to Seville and follow the route, the gastronomical route of La Peste, and so on. So how do we bring this to education? So basically is to think about how we can build the experience of learning around what the students are doing. So for me, was the important point here is how I can make the learning more participatory, more relevant for them, and obviously, as Pratten said, it has to have a goal. So the first thing I did when I started to think about this, it was to have a survey with the students to see what kind of media they were using. They were using it outside the classes for their personal or even professional. Some of my students are working as well as for the academic point of view. And then more recently came to this conceptual model of transmedia learning, which by Tomlinson, in which he talks about the importance of the collective intelligence and the participation. And an important point that I have been making over the last few years is the importance to bring in students as prosumers. So not only consumers of media, but also producers of media, and how that is important that then they share it, they can replicate it, and then they can connect what is happening inside the classroom, what is happening outside the classroom. And with this, they will be developing communication skills and other intertextual skills. So I wrote a couple of case studies just to simplify how this comes to life. So the first one is rethinking the assessment. So we wanted to change the way we were teaching some of the units, not the way we were teaching, but the way we were assessing the units. So we have some culture modules in second and final year, both for Spanish and for French, like for example, power and culture in Spain and Latin America, or transnational and transmedia practices in Latin America and Spain. And so we were wanting to see how we can change the assessment to bring this. So what we did was to include a multimodal, a film analysis of one scene of a film, that we have a series of set films, and then they could do it in different ways. So they could write a blog entry in Spanish, in French, if the unit is in French. They can do a podcast, or they can do a video essay in French and in Spanish. Apologies for the spelling mistake there. So I don't have the time to project this one, but if you want, I can share it, or you can just with your mobile phone get there. This is a real example of a video essay created by Carmen on the scene of one of the scenes from All About My Mother. So this is a real example of the assessment that the students do. And it's in Spanish, and it's absolutely fantastic. Now, second part is I wanted to bring a way of bridging the gap between formal and informal learning outcomes, and that's what I came with the project's transmedia practices, open educational resources for students by students. So basically, the project started yet before the pandemic, but it was very useful since then, and particularly during the pandemic. So I wanted to think, how can we reuse and share the knowledge that the students create, for example, in an essay or in an independent research project or dissertation? And what it is just to create or to share the real example or the assessment that they have done. So if I go back, this assessment, after it's finished, I ask the student, would you mind to share it with other students, future students for the coming years? And they say yes. So what we are doing it, in this case, it was only necessary to add the Creative Commons logo there to make sure. In other cases, we needed to ensure that the students understood what they were the different types of licenses and how they can make sure that they fulfill those characteristics. So here you have another example, is Jack. When I asked him to create a video, he said, no, I don't want to do a video. In order to share what I learned by doing my independent research project and the kind of tips I'm going to give future students, I want to create a series of podcasts. So we have, he did 8 podcasts from starting with which topics to choose to the literature review and so on until the end. Another example here is a real example of an oral presentation, but instead of having the 10 minutes that normally the presentation will last, I asked Megan to do it in a very short way. Or another example here is a video blog in which she also shared how to survive your independent research project. So the kind of informal practice come into the practical way of learning. The evaluation of these case studies is that it really encourages peer learning and foster a more student-centered approach. Learners develop a transferable skills and lifelong learning, because when we started with this one, many of them say, I haven't done a podcast, I never done a video essay before, I have never created a blog, but this is something that some of them have taken forward. There is, I think the way we have redesigned the module assessment has meant that the students feel more confident and they are more successful in the learning process. I think there is a clear link in between the transmedia learning and employability skills as well. More importantly, we are sure that we offer a more inclusive language learning experience, bringing authentic, flexible ways of assessing and kind of more peer-to-peer support. And I'm about to finish to give time to give you. Obviously, we are now in another area. When I was talking before about the different areas, we need to include now, obviously, the artificial intelligence educational research. And I'm not interested in the kind of data or anything, but more about the practical ways of including that research into making sure that the pedagogy is as the base. So we consider that when I started at the beginning, we have all these different skills or literacies to develop. We have their television, cinema, games, internet. But now we have all of these provided by the UNESCO, including artificial intelligence literacy, television. So some of them are the same, but we do have new ones there. So it's even more important than ever, the media and information literacy. And I'm sure, like I have been doing over the last 3 years, I have spent and go to many different conference, symposiums, workshops to think about how to use artificial intelligence, how to integrate it. I think it's something that we are not going to be able to avoid. In fact, I don't want to avoid. I want to see how I can make the most of it. So, 3 invitation for you. The first one is you would like to adopt or adapt the transmedia practices, the open educational resources for students by students. Please, I'd love to share it with you. I have examples now from the University of Zaragoza in Spain that they are using it with the master in English. I also have an example from Bradford University, not with language teaching, but with science. They have also adapted. And finally, if you would like to collaborate in the next phase of the project, which is including the use of artificial intelligence for L2, please send me an email, or there you have a code for my LinkedIn profile, and I love to have a chat and discuss with you the possible collaborations. And finally, this is an invitation for you to join the Philly Language Teaching Association. As I say, it's completely free, and we would like to have more colleagues from different languages joining us from across the world as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carmen. That was very interesting and informative. We've got time for questions and discussion. So if you want to ask a question, you can use the raise hand function, and I can unmute you so you can ask your question. Otherwise, you can write your question into the Q&A or into the chat, and I'll read it out for you. So I have a couple of very naive questions, not being directly involved in language teaching, but I'll give a moment to see if any of my more well-informed colleagues or other participants have some more precise questions on presentation. Maybe while we're waiting for those questions to come in, as you were talking about film and use of media in language teaching, I was wondering if do you get any pushback from other more traditional approaches? So obviously we want the classroom to connect with students' lives, but there's maybe things that students aren't doing as much in their lifestyle, like reading, like connecting interpersonally directly with people, where on the flip side would be maybe the classroom is a place where we can force them or give them the opportunity to experience things that they're maybe not doing in their regular life. So I don't think you're saying film should replace everything and should only be film, but how do you think about balancing the use of media with more traditional literature, textbook-based interpersonal activities?
Well, that's something I have been also starting about. That's another project, that's another talk. But for example, I have been collaborating over the last 3 years, this will be the 4th year, with the Instituto Cervantes in a project called Vasos Comunicantes, Vessels of Communication. For me, the idea is sometimes you get to the novel, for example, in different ways. So I was thinking, if you think about a novel that then they have been adapted into a film, but sometimes you have also a graphic novel, and then bringing the author to talk about the novel, and then reflecting about how the novel has been taken into a film or even a graphic novel. So we have fantastic examples of this. And for me, in the first presentation that we have with Jesus Carrasco, a wonderful novel that it was made into a film by Benito Zambrano, and I also have the graphic novel. That was the moment where I thought, yes, I'm on the right track, because then people were coming later and saying, oh, can I have a look at the graphic novel? And then the graphic novel will take them back to the book. So it's that kind of interconnection which allow us for rethinking how we can establish or making sure that more and more people think about going back to the test and back. So instead of separate it, and we published a couple of articles about transmediation. So basically about the importance of also developing the skills to analyze how the transfer is being made between a novel and a film and a graphic novel. So we have a couple of examples with Spanish and with French in this article written with Isabel van der Schendel. So it is very important to read. It's about how do you get to that point. And we do have also short stories as well. But I have to say, when it comes to choosing the assessment, not many people, not many students choose the short stories. There's always one or two, but not many.
So then, yeah, I see the film is the starting point, not the end point. You can connect it to the written and to the dialogues around it and all of that as well.
Yeah.
I have a question
Exactly.
here from a colleague, Daniela Carboni, who teaches Italian here. She's asking, what's your experience of proposing older screen media? For example, I have students who have never watched anything in black and white and they don't want to.
Yeah. And again, this is, the thing about being so old or experienced. I used to also teach in modules where it was mainly about films, and those ones were students that really they were passionate about films, and they were really to learn about classic films. What I realized with the time is more and more the student didn't have that background of, if you want, kind of classic films. So sometimes when I'm talking, I don't know, let's say I'm talking about Pan's Labyrinth, so I'm talking about The Devil's Backbone by Guillermo del Toro, and I say, this filmmaker is connecting with Buñuel. And I said, Buñuel. And I said, well, okay, Luis Buñuel, you should watch this film and the other. It doesn't mean, and I always say, I'm going to give you time to consider maybe taking a couple of notes here, or film noir. They don't know what is film noir, for example, but film noir is an important reference in many of contemporary pieces of art. So why don't you go back and try to have a look? So I know it's difficult, but this is something. The problem I said is not about not knowing; it's about the lack of curiosity. So maybe it's about trying to generate that curiosity and open up new opportunities for discovering classic films or classic novels.
Yeah, that's great. Another question here from Jari says, could you share some ideas for how students can use film in their IRP research? How many possibilities do they have? Bearing in mind that some students will be studying modern foreign language and film studies as part of their A levels.
Okay, so yeah, I always have 2 or 3 students who want to do something with film. So for example, in the past, I have students who were really interested in women filmmakers. I always have one of the units in Power and Culture. We always talk about women representation in society. And so I always bring an example of contemporary women filmmakers. Because for me, it's important that they realize they can bring something new nobody else have done about it. So there is always lots of new films and new filmmakers, and I bring that as a kind of possibility. So sometimes it's about looking at technology. So for example, currently I have a couple of, one student who is really interested in how they are learning language through films, through YouTube, for example, through Netflix, but there are now extensions that they can add to Netflix and to YouTube to enhance the learning of the vocabulary. So basically, with this one, they will be able to click and see and save the vocabulary even the sentences when they are watching the film. So that's something for me new in a way, because I can see that this is an area that is really important for them. So that's another one that they are doing. Or it can be more like one of my final year students wants to do something about Catalonia and independence. So one question is, can I do a survey? And I always say, yeah, it's challenging because how many people are going to respond to your survey? But if you think about how is this represented in films, documentaries, so that's what is working. So there are many ways of applying, and I always think try to keep up with current examples. So we have Antonio there sharing a few examples there as well. And
Looking
another
for
thing,
sure.
yeah, another, for example, one of my final year students who came the other day to discuss his presentation, he came and showed me what he has done, which is basically break up every single scene with the transcription of all the dialogue. And I was just blew up. And I said, okay, you know what you're going to do? We have the presentation on Mondays. Friday, you are doing a showcase to the whole class about how you are doing. And my next step is asking him to create a video to share with these open educational resources for students by students and some teachers who are also learning. So this is the idea, generating the idea of sharing whatever new approach they're using, bring it to the class, share it with the class, and then it facilitates everybody. Yeah.
Sounds also very empowering for the student to get to contribute and share in that way.
Yeah,
Is it
and
related?
that's something that we do in all the classes. So over the last 3 years, students have to do an informal presentation of the theoretical frameworks we are using. Then they use it for their own assessment or not, but that gives them the confidence that the generation of knowledge is really important. They are at the same level that me. No, and that's really important because it creates a better way of learning and teaching for me.
So another question here from Dr. Steen. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe you can add some more points. Who says, I've used a lot of cortometrajes instead of using the whole film or even scenes in order to work specific grammar points and vocabulary. Do you have any more tips to make the best of it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One of the projects that we did a few years ago, it was about training teachers to use screen media, but we focus only in short films because we realized, well, two things. I'm sure you also realize about that. We don't have so much time in class to do it. Particularly, we were working with secondary language teachers, but also higher education teachers. So they say, I don't have time to use a whole film. And the second point is that it was really useful, and they say the same. I was trying to say, yeah, grammar, poem, vocabulary is really important, but not everything. So we were using short films without dialogue. And I know how they're going to learn without dialogue. The important point there was that for those with the beginner's level or, A1, A2, they were not worried about not understanding what it was happening there because there was no dialogue. So then we focus more on using the visual skills. And then from that one, we develop other kind of activities where they were using the language. So I think that's my point. Think about films without dialogues, and it really generates a different way of learning. And then you may focus in a grammar point in the kind of type of activities that you are doing after with that kind of short film. So there are lots.
It sounds like this can take a lot of preparation time. So I imagine part of the skills is learning how to do this effectively as a teacher, so you're not spending all of your time selecting films and preparing activities.
Yeah, and that's one of the points about the Philly Language Teaching Association, because we are constantly kind of generating resources. And the point was about this community of practice is about sharing and getting inspiration from others. So all the resources that we have there you may only use one part, or you may just be inspired and say, oh, that's a good way of doing it. For example, starting with the posters, the type of activities that we can generate with the posters, and so on, the types of discussion, creation of films by students. So that's another. We also do with short films a competition, a kind of field review competition, and we do it as well with secondary language students. So they review one film, one short film, and then we have a kind of celebration of the best review that they have done. So, there are lots of ways of using from short films, and there are a lot of resources available there, not to start from zero. As well as, for example, where do I find the short films? That was one of the, I don't have time to spend. But again, in the Philly Language Teaching Association, there is an area for videos. So you click there and you find videos. You put Spanish, will appear some for Spanish, or for topic, food, or I don't know, Spain, or wherever. So there are lots of resources there as well.
We got one more question here from colleague Charlie Redmond. He asks, have you looked at all at age in media use? For example, I noticed the older retirement age students in my Korean class almost always came to the language first through K-dramas, and that is often their lens reviewing the language.
So I'm going to see, what is that question? Did I see that one? So how do
it's in the Q&A.
Okay.
So he's saying that for Korean learners, he's noticing it's actually first the K-drama, then they become interested in the language, and it's older people who are getting involved in watching this media and then get the language interest versus wanting to learn the language first and then media.
To be honest, I have all type of experiences as well on that one. For example, I have co-created a season, a Spanish season for with the Instituto Cervantes for learners of Spanish. Most of them are, let's say, senior learners, and they actually love going to that because they may be in different level, but the opportunity to see it and then discuss it is really good. I know the Instituto Cervantes here in Manchester, they also have a series of sessions where they come and talk. I think they are more used to kind of cine club style, if you know what I mean. I also know that, for example, students in my university who are doing Japanese, they come to study Japanese, many of them, because they love, manga, and so they came through that. For Korean, I know is through pop culture, and so I don't think there is one way or for different languages, but what is clear is that screen media is available to all levels of skills of language as well as different cultures.
Well, I think that's all the questions people have asked for today. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation and engaging with these questions and sharing those resources and websites that people can go to as well. So hopefully that's helpful for people to continue to engage.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks everyone for being with us today and asking your questions. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias.